Today, I'm going to teach you how to structure your handstand training so that you can learn to hold a handstand. Now, I taught myself how to handstand back in 2017. And since then, I've learned different handstand shapes, different handstand presses, handstand push-up, and I'm now actually learning how to hold a one-armed handstand. I'm also a calisthenics and strength coach, and I've taught heaps of clients, both in person and face-to-face, how to hold a handstand, and I've run a lot of workshops on it as well. And today's video is all about giving you the knowledge needed to create a DIY handstand program. The structure I'm going to talk to you about today really is catered for beginners. As someone who has experience coaching adults who have no gymnastics background, maybe no sporting background, or maybe even no gym background at all, I understand that beginner looks different for everyone and that it is quite a spectrum, especially when it comes to handstands. So some beginners may not have the strength or the confidence to kick up to the wall yet. Some beginners can kick up to the wall, but they don't have the confidence or the skill level to kick up without the wall. And then we've got people who can kick up to a handstand without a wall, totally fine to do that, but then can't hold it. And then we've got people who can kick up and maybe sometimes they can hold it for 4 to 5 seconds, but they can't repeat that and they don't know why. So that's all the ranges of beginner. If you are someone who now has the skill level to realistically aim to hold a consistent 30-second handstand, or maybe you're working on handstand shapes, handstand presses, handstand push-up, one arms, this is probably not going to be the ideal routine for you. Just remember that the routine that got you from point A to point B is not always going to be the routine that gets you from point B to point C. And speaking of routine, let's get into the handstand training structure. The first part of your handstand session should always be your warm-up. Please, please, please do not skip your warm-up. Humans were not made to be upside down on our hands, so our wrists are not our ankles. And when we're thinking about our warm-up and what drills to do, we just want to think about the functions of the wrist and the forearm. So we've got extension, flexion, pronation, supination, radial deviation, and ulnar deviation. On top of that, handstands are a vertical pushing exercise, so we want to spend time warming up our shoulders and our triceps. And then an efficient handstand kick-up requires good pike flexibility and good active hamstring flexibility, so you also want to make sure you're warming up your hamstrings too. After your warm-up, there are 4 things you want to focus on in your training: skill, strength, freestanding practice, and not everyone will need this depending on where you're at, but also mobility. Just a real quick caveat that a lot of handstand drills are going to fall somewhere on a spectrum between skill and strength. They are not mutually exclusive. This is because whatever your goal is when it comes to handstands, whether it's just to stand still, whether you want to do a handstand press or a push-up or, a fancy flow, you're always going to need to be switched on. You need to be both proactive and reactive when it comes to doing a handstand. And the thing with this spectrum of skill and strength is that different handstand drills are just going to bias more towards one than the other. That is like a whole YouTube or even multiple YouTube videos in itself. So leave a comment below if that is something you want to learn about. But in the meantime, let's get on with the rest of the routine. After our warm-up, we want to do our skill drills first. Why? Because we are physically and mentally fresher at the beginning of our sessions, which means we are better able to execute skills, which means we're then going to do better quality sets. And then from those quality sets, we are switched on enough to learn and to focus and realize how what we're learning in this skill drill is going to apply to our freestanding practice later on in the session. Basically, doing our skill drills first is more productive. Being physically fresher also minimizes any compensations that our body likes to use when we're fatigued. Let's take heel pulls as an example. Heel pulls is a drill that teaches you how to use your fingertips to press into the floor to stop you from tipping over in a handstand. This drill places a lot of demand on the fingertips, and look at them, they're tiny. So it's really common that when these tiny little things get fatigued, people start to use their lower back or they start to use their hips to drag their feet off the wall. And doing this kind of makes doing the drill quite redundant because one, you're not actually practicing the skill of using your fingertips to pull your heels off the wall. And 2, these compensations just don't even allow the fingertips to get stronger. As we discussed earlier, beginner looks different for everyone, so let's go over some quick examples of what these skill drills could be. If you can't yet kick up to the wall, a skill drill for you could be handstand shrugs because you're learning how to push the floor away from you in that vertical position. And if we're going back to that spectrum of skill and strength, if you are a beginner who can kick up to the wall, handstand shrugs might actually be more of a strength drill for you. So different exercises can actually move along the spectrum depending on where you are in your handstand journey. If you are someone who is confident and strong enough to kick up to the wall, but maybe you like to launch yourself at the wall, a good skill drill for you could be practicing a kick up against the wall where your feet are landing as softly as possible. So this way you're learning how to control your kick up and you're learning the appropriate amount of momentum to use. And this is going to help you be able to move off the wall and to be able to do a nice controlled kick up without a wall. And then for our final type of beginner, if you are someone who you can kick up with control, you've got some confidence to kick up without the wall, and you're now looking to hold it, the skill drill chosen could be the hill pulls that I was talking about earlier. After your skill drill, you're then going to move on to a strength drill. And if we go back to that spectrum of strength and skill, just remember that just because something is categorized as a strength drill, it doesn't mean that it doesn't require skills. And it also doesn't mean that it's not going to improve your actual hand balancing skills. It's just like weightlifting. A heavy deadlift requires a lot of skill as well. Let's use the nose to wall as an example, because yes, this drill is going to get your wrists, your forearms, your shoulders, your traps, your upper back stronger. But when you're doing this, you don't just have to count down the seconds when you're doing the drill. Instead of just focusing on the seconds passing you by, you can actually use this drill to focus on what different body parts feel like upside down. So you could practice flexing your quads, just so that you can understand how it feels to control your lower body when you're upside down. Are you focusing maybe on what it feels like to have your weight evenly distributed on your hands? So, are you feeling your fingertips gripping the floor? You can also explore how much range do you have to really push and elevate your shoulders as much as possible in that vertical angle. The beauty of the nose to wall is that you have the wall assistance. And I know so many beginners want to rush away from using the wall, but no matter where you are in your handstand training, the wall is always going to be your friend. With the specific nose to wall, usually when you kick up without any assistance, you're focusing so much on just doing what you can to balance. But because you have the wall, you are then given the mental space to actually be able to explore your body and what it feels like to be in your body. Essentially, you are improving your spatial awareness, and that improved spatial awareness translates really nicely to being able to hold a handstand without the wall. So when it comes to strength drills, you really can get so much more out of it beyond just the strength that comes with doing sets and reps. And the reason why I would recommend putting strength drills after your skill drills is that these strength drills tend to fatigue you a lot more. And like I've said earlier, you want to be mentally fresher and physically fresher for your skill drills. After your strength drills, you're then going to move on to your freestanding practice. And a lot of coaches are going to argue black and white
that freestanding practice should always come first,
because as continually repeated,
you are mentally and physically fresher at the beginning of your session.
As for me, I am very much an it depends kind of person when it comes to where you're going to put your freestanding practice. From what I've said earlier with the different types of beginners, if you fall under one of those categories, I do recommend that freestanding practice comes at the end. My reasoning for this is that some beginners may not have the knowledge, skill, or spatial awareness yet to actually have a productive freestanding practice. And this is why I sort of see freestanding practice as like the play element of your handstand training. Some beginners may not be confident enough, strong enough, or skilled enough to properly kick up without a wall yet, and they may just be kicking up over and over and over again, making the same mistake, but they're not actually getting any benefits out of this because they're not actually addressing the root cause of why they can't kick up. And the knowledge for how to fix your kick up, especially if you are coaching yourself, is going to come from the skill and the strength drills. This is why I recommend beginners put their freestanding after their skill and strength drills. And there's two main reasons for this. Firstly, if you're doing your skill and your strength drills, ideally you're using the rest breaks there to reflect on what you're doing in order to then apply it to your freestanding practice. So putting your freestanding practice at the end just allows you to pull from what you've just learned and apply that to your freestanding practice. And a lot of people, myself included, can get carried away with freestanding practice. And before you know it, you spent all your handstand time either just kicking up and not giving yourself enough time to do your skill and strength drills that you then have to go home or, move on to the other parts of your training. or you've spent so much time kicking up freestanding that you have then gassed yourself too much to properly do your skill and strength drills. And let's not forget about the fourth and last element, which may or may not be necessary for you, which is mobility. Because this is a video that is providing general advice, my general recommendation is to do your mobility after your handstand training. Now, if that is something that is necessary for you, for our upper body mobility, we want to address our external rotation, our pecs, and our lats. And then for our lower body, the mobility we want to address would be around our hamstrings and our hip flexors. Now, how would this work within your week? I normally recommend practicing handstands 2 to 3 times a week. So now that you've got this structure, you can create your own handstand program. For example, say you want to practice twice a week. You'll pick 2 skill drills and then you'll put one on one day, one on the other day. You'll do the same thing for strength drills and, if necessary, the same thing for mobility drills. You may just need to do upper body mobility. You may be someone who needs to do both upper and lower body mobility. Repeat that for 4 to 6 weeks, and then from there, reflect on your progress and then progress the drills as necessary for your next block of handstand training. Now, when you apply this structure, you might actually realize that this workout is quite short in comparison to other things that you're seeing online. And the reason why I've done this is so that you can actually fit your handstand training in with your multiple other fitness goals, which I'm sure you have. We only have so much time in the day and in the week to realistically focus on all our fitness and health goals. This is the structure I actually use in my handstand guide, and then I put recommendations in the guide to actually show you how you can fit your handstand training in amongst all your other health and fitness goals so that you can see some consistent progress amongst all of them. If you have watched this whole video and you're like, I don't know what drills to pick, or I can't be bothered to pick the drills myself, or you're constantly doing drills and you're like, I don't know if I'm doing this right, my handstand guide helps with all of this. There's 4 handstand programs in there and then recommendations on which handstand program to begin with, depending on what type of beginner you are. Each handstand program has 4 weeks of training all planned for you. Once you've done the 4 weeks, you'll then move on to the next program, which has some new drills that are then going to continue to challenge and progress your handstand skills. On top of that, there are 2 mobility programs in there, one for your upper body, one for your lower body, and I also teach you how to self-assess so that way you can know whether or not you need these mobility programs. And I've also put a boatload of handstand theory in there that will make your practice even better. My handstand guide is everything I wish I had when I was teaching myself how to handstand. And if you have made it all the way to the end of this video, here is the discount code, YouTube20, and that is going to get you 20% off of the handstand guide as a little thank you for watching the whole thing. I'll make sure to put a link to the guide in the description below. I had a lot of fun prepping this video. I could talk about handstands for eons. I post a lot of handstand tutorials on Instagram as well as clips of my own training, so go follow me on there if you are keen to keep up with that. And if you do, send me a DM and let me know you're from YouTube because I would love to know. I could also go on and on about any calisthenics movement really, or any compound lift. So if you've got a specific request and a breakdown you'd like to see, pop them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.